Beneath the city of Gondor, a young scholar is about to risk everything. Alara moves in silence through the forbidden Hall of Kings. Her goal, the ancient white tree, whose light is slowly dying. She believes its fading glow is the only thing that can restore her kingdom's lost wisdom, a truth the elders have forbidden anyone to seek. By defying them, she faces exile, but the danger is worth the chance to save her home from forgetting itself. In this tale, you will discover the profound reason the White Trees of Gondor glow with ancient memory, and how one person's courage can rekindle a light for an entire world. What forgotten secrets lie buried in the roots of a dying tree, and what happens when a society chooses to forget its own past? I am curious if it feels right to share. Where are you listening from right now, and what is the local time where you are? Her fingers brushed the cold, smooth root, and the world fell silent. Then came the whispers, not in her ears but within her mind itself, a chorus of faint, ancient voices speaking a language long forgotten. They pulled her gaze to a crevice in the marble floor, nearly invisible beneath twisting ivy and dust. Without a second thought, she pushed aside the foliage, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The decision was made in an instant, a gamble on a feeling deeper than fear. But as she took her first step down, a sharp cry echoed from the hall above. The tree wardens had found the disturbed earth near the roots. Their heavy footsteps pounded closer, their voices urgent. Elara froze, pressed against the cold stone, her heart hammering. Were these whispers a guide to salvation, or a siren's call leading her to ruin? Tradition screamed at her to flee back to the light, but the memory of the tree's dying light was a sharper pain. She chose the whispers. Slipping into the passage, she pulled the ivy back over the opening, just as torchlight flooded the hall above. The stone steps were uneven and slick with moisture, the air growing thick and cold. With every moment, she felt the tree's faint glow above her dimming further, as if a great clock was counting down the seconds until the final memory faded forever. Deeper she went, the darkness so complete she had to feel her way along the wall. Then, a soft, silver light began to emanate from somewhere ahead, a promise of answers that also carried the chilling weight of the unknown. The silver light bled from a crack in the tunnel wall, revealing not a simple chamber, but a sanctuary of living stone. Elara slipped inside, her breath catching. The walls were not mere rock, they were a tapestry. Faded murals depicted a towering figure, Isildur, his hands cradling a single, luminous fruit. He was planting it in the blood-soaked earth of a mountain slope, a defiant act of life after a great darkness. And the light in the murals was not paint. A faint, golden sap still clung to the carved lines, shimmering with a soft, internal radiance. This was the source of the silver glow. The very memory of that first planting was preserved here, a visual echo that had never faded. The tree's light was not just a symbol, it was a vessel, and this chamber was a living record of the moment Gondor's hope took root. A low rumble echoed from the tunnel behind her, the sound of heavy boots on stone. They were in the passages now. Her time was vanishing. She turned to the mural's base, where an inscription was carved in flowing script. It was a riddle. I drink not water, yet I grow. I hold no breath, yet I live. I speak no words, yet I tell all. Seek the Heartwood where the first root drank. The words were ancient, a test for a lore master. The Heartwood. It was not a physical place on any map she knew. It was the core of the first tree, the very essence of its beginning. The answer was not a location, but an origin point. Whispering the words, she traced the carving of the sapling in the mural, her fingers finding a depression where the tiny root met the stone. Where the first root drank, pressing the spot, she felt a deep click resonate through the floor. A section of the wall slid away without a sound, revealing a new darkness. But her triumph was short-lived. A deep, resonant chime echoed through the chamber and out into the tunnels, an alarm that seemed to shake the very dust from the ceiling. The Wardens would be on her now, their pursuit swift and certain. There was no going back. Stepping through the doorway, Alara entered a vast, luminous grove where the past felt vividly alive. The grove was not made of wood and leaf, but of light and memory. Ethereal figures stood among shimmering trunks, each one a remembered king of Gondor. They were echoes, their faces shifting like mist, yet their eyes held the weight of ages. One turned to Elara, its form coalescing into a stern ruler with a crown of stars. You seek to understand the fading, it spoke, not with sound, but directly into her thoughts. The tree weakens because your people have turned their faces from us. They walk in the present sun, but cast no shadow from the past. A cascade of visions flooded Elara's mind, not as pictures, but as feelings. She felt the pride of a great victory, the sorrow of a lost peace, the hard-won wisdom from a terrible defeat. These were the memories the tree preserved, the very foundation upon which just rule was built. To forget them was to build a city on sand, but the echoes wavered, their light flickering with suspicion. Why should we trust one of the forgetful? Another voice resonated, heavy with disappointment. Your own elders forbid this path. How are you different? Fear clenched Elara's heart. She was different only in her desperation, in her refusal to let the light die. I am afraid, she confessed to the luminous forms, her own voice a whisper in the vast space. But my fear of forgetting is greater than my fear of you. I would rather be exiled for seeking truth than be safe in a kingdom that has lost its soul. Her honesty hung in the air, a fragile offering. The stern King Echo studied her, and for a moment she felt her very intentions laid bare. Then his form softened. The bond is not broken, only neglected, he intoned. It can be reforged, but it requires a vessel. A new seed must be planted, not just in earth, but in the heart of the people. With those words, a single, radiant seed of light coalesced before her, pulsing with a soft, steady warmth. As she reached for it, a thunderous crash echoed through the grove. The stone doorway she had entered through shattered inward. The tree wardens, their faces set in grim determination, flooded into the sacred space. The echoes of the kings flared in brilliant defiance, their combined light blinding the wardens for a precious second. Go, the voices commanded her. The path ahead is written in a place they no longer read. Elara's fingers closed around the glowing seed. It felt not like an object, but like a living promise. She turned and ran, spotting a low archway veiled by roots of solid light. She knew, with a certainty that felt like memory itself, that it led to the city's oldest, most forgotten library. The forgotten library was a tomb for books, a labyrinth of dust and silence. Elara found Maldir not among the main shelves, but in a small, windowless chamber tucked behind a collapsed bookcase. He was an old man, his back bent from decades of stooping over texts, and his eyes widened in alarm, not surprise, when he saw her. "You should not be here," he whispered, his voice raspy with disuse. "They forbade this research for a reason." He gestured to a small, locked chest under his desk, the home for scrolls he had not dared to open in many years. "The elders believe the past is a ghost that haunts the present," he explained, his hands trembling slightly. "They think remembering old glories and failures only breeds discontent. They want a kingdom that looks only forward. But how can you build a future on a foundation you are afraid to examine?" Alara countered, her voice fierce with a conviction that surprised even her. She opened her hand, allowing the soft, steady light of the seed to pulse in the dim room. "Look at this. This is not a ghost. This is a promise." The light played across Maldir's weathered face, and for a long moment he was silent, warring with his own fear. Then something in him seemed to settle. He saw in Alara's eyes the same desperate hope he had once felt, a hope that had been systematically extinguished by years of quiet threats and enforced conformity. "You remind me of who I used to be," he sighed, the fear in his eyes giving way to a fragile resolve. With a determined nod, he produced a small key and unlocked the chest. Inside were scrolls of thin, supple leather, covered in intricate script and diagrams depicting the ancient rituals of remembrance. "This one," he said, unrolling the largest, "shows how the people's collective memory feeds the tree's light. It is not a one-way channel. The tree gives us wisdom, but it draws its strength from our shared stories, our songs, our acknowledgement of where we came from. We have stopped telling those stories," as Maldir traced a diagram of a ceremony where citizens would gather to share tales of the past. The sound of heavy, hurried footsteps echoed from the corridor outside. A sharp voice called Maldir's name, an order, not a request. The elders knew they had been discovered. Maldir's face paled, but his hands were steady as he quickly rolled the most vital scroll and thrust it into Alara's hands. He then grabbed a small, shielded lantern. "There is another way out," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Through the catacombs. They think the past is buried there, and they are right, but not in the way they believe." As the door to the chamber began to splinter under the force of the guards, the old librarian led Alara to a hidden panel in the wall, and they slipped into the cold, silent darkness of the city's bones, the voices of their pursuers close behind. The air in the catacombs was a cold, still breath from a forgotten age. Elara held the glowing seed aloft, its soft light pushing back the oppressive darkness just enough to reveal a narrow, twisting passage. The stones underfoot were treacherous, slick with a strange, damp moss, and Maldir moved with a labored slowness that sent a spike of fear through her with every stumble. The guards' shouts echoed behind them, distorted and multiplied by the labyrinthine tunnels, seeming to come from every direction at once. The seed's light did more than guide them, it reacted to their surroundings. As they passed walls studded with dark, dormant crystals, the gems would flicker to life, pulsing with a faint, answering gleam. In one larger chamber, the crystals erupted in a sudden, silent symphony of color, projecting fragmented visions of long-dead queens and ancient celebrations onto the walls. The memory of the tree was stored here, In the very bones of the mountain, a backup record the elders had never known existed. But the light show was a beacon they could not afford. "We are leading them right to us," Maldir gasped, leaning heavily against the damp wall. His face was pale in the shifting light. Alara's mind raced, her eyes scanning the diverging paths ahead. One was wide and clear, the other a jagged crack in the rock, partially blocked by a recent fall of rubble. The safe path would be slower, and the guards were gaining. The dangerous one promised a quicker, if more perilous, route to the older, deeper levels where they might lose their pursuers. She made the choice in a heartbeat. "This way," she said, pulling the old man toward the unstable fissure. They squeezed through the narrow opening, the rock groaning in protest around them. The moment they were through, a deep, grinding rumble filled the tunnel as a section of the ceiling behind them gave way, sealing the passage with a cloud of dust and shattered stone. The immediate threat was gone, but the cost was severe. They were trapped. The chamber they stood in was small, and the only light came from Alara's seed, which now flickered weakly, its glow fading as if drained by the collapse. In the growing dimness, a new detail emerged. The walls were not blank. They were covered in intricate, flowing symbols, carved with a precision that spoke of immense importance. Elara moved closer, her heart leaping. The patterns were a perfect match for the markings that swirled across the surface of the seed itself. It was not a map, but a key. The chamber was not a tomb, it was a place of renewal. The symbols on the wall pulsed in answer to the seed's fading light. Without hesitation, Alara pressed the glowing seed against the central carving. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the entire chamber erupted. It was not a simple brightness, but a living, breathing storm of memory. The very air became a canvas for Gondor's past. She saw soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder against impossible odds, their faces etched with fear and resolve. She witnessed a queen surrendering her crown to save her people from famine, her quiet dignity, a different kind of courage. These were not just images, they were echoes of emotion, of sacrifice, of triumph. The seed in her hand began to drink it all in, vibrating with a power that made her fingers tingle. Its dim glow intensified, burning with a fierce white light that promised renewal for the dying tree above. But then she heard a ragged breath. Maldir had slumped to the floor, his face ashen. The flight and the damp cold had taken their toll. A terrible choice crystallized in an instant. She could save all the seed's power for the White Tree, securing the kingdom's future, but letting this kind, brave man fade away in the darkness. Or she could act now. Compassion outweighed strategy. Cradling the seed, she knelt and placed it over Maldir's heart. She did not command its power. She only asked, pouring her own intention into the light. A soft radiance flowed from the seed into the old man's chest. Color returned to his cheeks, and his breathing steadied into a deep, peaceful rhythm. He was saved. But the cost was immediate. The seed's brilliant light dimmed noticeably, its stored energy now only a fraction of what it had been. It still held power, but the margin for error had vanished. At that moment, a sharp cry echoed from a nearby tunnel, amplified by the chamber's lingering radiance. Their sanctuary had become a beacon, and the guards were closing in. "We must move," Maldir said, his voice stronger now as he pushed himself up, his eyes filled with a new clarity. He looked at the patterns on the wall, now fading back into mere carvings, and pointed to a section that depicted a route passing behind a waterfall. "That is no decoration," he said. "It is a map. There is a conduit, an old aqueduct for the tree's roots, that leads directly into the courtyard. It is how the gardeners once tended its deepest needs. It is our only chance." The cold, damp air of the conduit gave way to the crisp dawn of the courtyard. Alara and Maldir stumbled into the open, their clothes stained with dirt from the ancient passage, only to freeze. They were not alone. Head Elder Valandil stood before them, his face a mask of stern disappointment, flanked by a full contingent of tree wardens, with hands resting on their sword hilts. The white tree loomed behind him, its pale branches looking brittle and frail in the morning light. "You have trespassed in forbidden places and stolen what is not yours," Valandil declared, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Surrender the seed. Its power is not for the uninitiated to wield. It is a danger in reckless hands." A small crowd was gathering at the edges of the square, drawn by the commotion, their faces a mixture of sleepiness and growing curiosity. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment she had both feared and known would come. She could submit, hand over the dimmed seed, and perhaps face only exile. Or she could risk everything. She chose to speak. "The danger is not in remembering, but in forgetting," she called out, her voice clear and strong, carrying across the stones. She held up the seed, its light pulsing softly as if to emphasize her words. "The tree fades because we have abandoned it. We were meant to share its memories, to learn from its sorrows and its joys. You call this power volatile, but it only becomes unstable when it is locked away and ignored. Look at it." She gestured to the white tree, its faint glow flickering like a guttering candle. "Can you not see it dying?" The crowd murmured, their eyes shifting from Alara's defiant stance to the ailing tree. An old woman pointed a trembling finger. "She is right. The light is weaker than yesterday." A younger man shouted, "What memories? What are we not being told?" The unity of the crowd began to fracture, with some shouting support for the elder's authority, and others demanding to hear more. Valandil's composure tightened. "You speak of things you do not understand, child. You would tear down the peace we have built for a dangerous myth." The tree's light flickered again, more violently this time, and a collective gasp rippled through the courtyard. The pressure was building, a tangible force in the air. Just as Valandil opened his mouth to order her seized, a sudden, gentle breeze stirred the dry leaves of the white tree. It was not the harsh wind from the mountains, but a soft, warm breath that seemed to carry a whisper, a single ancient word that rustled through every branch and every heart. "Remember." The single word echoed not through the air, but within the soul of every person in the courtyard. "Remember." In its wake, a profound silence fell, so deep the only sound was the rustle of the white tree's dry leaves. Then a figure began to form. It wove itself from the last, fading light of the tree and the very dust of the square. A tall, spectral form, clad in the armor of a forgotten age. It was Isildur, not as a king, but as a man, his face etched with the grief and hope of the world's ending. His voice, when it came, was the sound of roots drinking deep from the earth and stars singing in the sky. "The tree does not glow for itself," he intoned, his gaze sweeping over the stunned crowd. "It shines with your light. It is a mirror for the honor of Gondor, for every story told, every sacrifice honored, every lesson learned by its people. It fades because the mirror has been covered. Valandil, the head elder, sank to his knees, his stern authority shattered into awe. The guards released their sword hilts, their faces filled with a reverence they had only ever read about in forbidden texts. The crowd did not cheer, they wept, a collective release of a burden they never knew they were carrying. They rallied around Alara not as a rebel, but as a guide, their murmured support becoming a unified, hopeful hum. But the spirit of Isildur was already fading, his form dissolving back into motes of light that drifted toward the frail tree. His final words were for Alara alone. The seed is a key, but the people are the lock. Turn it together. Now, with the eyes of the entire city upon her, Alara unrolled Maldir's scroll. The ancient diagrams seemed to swim before her eyes, the ritual more complex and demanding than she had imagined. It was not a simple incantation. It was a weaving of will. Her own strength, already frayed from the journey, would never be enough. She looked out at the sea of faces, at their newfound hope and their deep-seated fear. She knew what she had to do. Do not just watch, she called out, her voice clear and strong. Join me, let us do this together. She invited them forward, asking them to form a great circle around the white tree and to join hands. As they did, a current passed through them, a shiver of shared anticipation. She placed the glowing seed at the base of the tree's trunk, and as she began to chant the words from the scroll, she did not channel her own power alone. She opened herself, becoming a conduit for the collective faith, the shared memories, and the rekindled honor of every man, woman, and child in that circle. The seed responded, pulsing with a rhythmic, vibrant energy that beat in time with their hearts. It grew brighter, its light climbing the tree's trunk, causing the pale bark to shimmer. But the power was immense, a torrent threatening to overwhelm her. As the ritual reached its crescendo, the sky above the city darkened unnaturally, as if a storm had gathered in an instant. From deep beneath the citadel, a low, menacing rumble shook the very stones under their feet, a sound of ancient foundations groaning in protest. The very ground beneath their feet groaned in protest. Ancient stone, its foundations weakened by long years of forgotten care, shifted and cracked with a sound like tearing cloth. Fissures snaked across the courtyard, radiating out from the white tree and threatening to swallow the circle of joined hands. Panic surged through the crowd, a tangible wave of fear that threatened to shatter their fragile unity. People stumbled back, their chants faltering as the earth itself seemed to reject their efforts. Elara felt the ritual's delicate weave begin to unravel, the shared energy flickering like a candle in a storm. She had to act. Her focus split in two. She continued the ancient words, pouring her will into maintaining the connection with the people, while simultaneously directing the seed's power downward. She could not let the ground swallow them, not when they were so close. A part of the seed's brilliant light, energy meant solely for the tree's renewal, she siphoned away and forced into the cracking earth. Beams of pure white radiance shot into the fissures, fusing the stone with a web of solidified light, creating a temporary but stable platform. It was a terrible sacrifice, a direct drain on the power needed to save the tree, but it was the only way to save the people. As the tremors subsided, a new horror was revealed. The shifting ground had torn open the earth around the tree's base. exposing its pale, gnarled roots to the open air. They looked fragile, like old bones, and as the seed's restorative light was diverted, the tree's already faint glow dimmed to a mere shimmer, a ghost of the brilliance it was meant to hold. The race was now truly desperate. With the immediate danger contained and the people safe, Alara turned every ounce of her remaining concentration back to the white tree, her voice rising with a new, fierce determination to complete the ritual before the seed's precious light was completely spent. The chant became a river of sound, flowing from the people into Alara and from her into the fading seed. She felt the last of its stored energy surge up through her, a brilliant, burning current that she directed into the white tree's ancient roots. The words from Maldir's scroll were no longer just words. They were the very architecture of hope, and as the citizens added their voices, the power magnified. The tree's pale bark began to shimmer, no longer a dull white, but a living silver, and from its barren branches, new leaves of pure light unfurled, radiating a soft, healing glow that spread through the courtyard. But the cost was immense. Alara's own strength was the conduit, and it was fraying. A deep, cold exhaustion seeped into her bones, threatening to sever the connection. She could feel the ritual slipping, the light wavering. In that moment of crisis, she did not reach for more power. She reached deeper into herself. She poured her own memories into the flow, not of kings or battles, but of Gondor as she loved it. The scent of rain on the white stone of the city, the sound of children's laughter in a sunlit square, the quiet wisdom in Maldir's eyes as he unlocked the chest of forbidden knowledge. It was a personal offering, a sacrifice of her most cherished moments to fuel the tree's rebirth. The seed in her hands pulsed with a final, blinding intensity, and then it dissolved, becoming one with the light it had unleashed. The release of energy was a silent detonation that threw her backward. Alara collapsed to the cold stone, her vision dimming, her last conscious thought a desperate, unspoken question. Was it enough? As she fell, the white tree's glow did not falter. It intensified, its light no longer soft but brilliant and triumphant, a wave of pure warmth and memory that washed over her still form and swept across the entire citadel. Warmth was the first thing Elara felt. It seeped into her bones, chasing away the deep cold of her exhaustion. A gentle light pulsed against her closed eyelids. She opened them slowly, her vision blurry at first, then clearing to reveal a miracle. The white tree was no longer a pale, dying sentinel. It was a pillar of living radiance, its bark shining with a soft, internal silver fire. From branches that had been barren, thousands of new leaves rustled, each one edged in light, and then came the blossoms. They unfurled like slow-motion stars, their petals a delicate white that shimmered with the same silver hue, filling the air with a fragrance that was both utterly new and hauntingly familiar, like a song heard in a childhood dream. A profound silence held the courtyard, a silence not of absence, but of awe. Then a single voice rose in a cheer, and it was joined by another and another, until the entire square was filled with a sound of pure, unburdened joy. People were weeping and embracing, strangers clasping each other's shoulders, their faces illuminated not just by the tree's light, but by a rekindled sense of shared identity. Head Elder Valandil stepped forward, his stern face transformed by wonder. He did not speak to the crowd, but to Alara. "The ban is lifted," he declared, his voice carrying a new humility. The study of our past will no longer be a crime. It will be our duty. The light of the tree is our shared inheritance, and we will learn from it once more. Elara pushed herself up, her body feeling fragile, but her spirit soaring. The joy was immense, but so was the weight settling onto her shoulders. The people looked to her now, their faces full of questions. She had not just restored a tree, she had awakened a hunger. In that moment, the decision felt inevitable. She would not return to the quiet life of a scholar. "I will be your guide," she said, her voice clear despite her weariness. "I will be the keeper of this memory, and I will teach you how to listen." Her vow was met with a wave of approval, but her own thoughts were already turning inward. The tree's brilliant glow was doing more than illuminating faces. It was revealing secrets long hidden by shadow. Across the citadel, faintly glowing lines appeared on ancient walls, tracing the outlines of doorways and archways no one had seen in centuries. The light was a key, unlocking a city within the city, a labyrinth of history waiting to be explored. In the days that followed, Alara began her new work, training the first eager apprentices in the rituals of remembrance. Yet at night, her dreams were not of recent triumphs, but of older, deeper shadows. She walked in vast, silent halls of black stone, and a cold wind whispered of a memory even the white tree had tried to forget. The new light of the tree painted Alara's dreams in colors of memory and dread. She stood on a white shore, but the sea was rising, swallowing a gleaming city of impossible beauty. This was Numenor, the land of kings from before kings, and it was dying. In the chaos, she saw a single, desperate figure, Elendil, his face etched with a grief that transcended ages. He clutched a sapling, the last sign of a tree that had graced that doomed land, and he fled onto a ship as the world cracked and the waves devoured everything. The white tree was not merely a symbol of hope. It was a refugee, carrying within its very fibers the profound sorrow and unbroken resilience of an entire people lost to the sea. Its glow was not just a record of glory, but a vessel for a civilization's final, gasping breath. This was a memory the tree had guarded in its deepest heartwood, a truth far heavier than the triumphant tales of Gondor's founding. Elara awoke with the salt of a phantom ocean on her lips and a new weight on her soul. To honor the tree fully, she had to honor this too. The past was not only a source of pride, it was a teacher of humility, a stark reminder that even the greatest kingdoms could fall to arrogance and fear. She decided that Numenor's story must become part of her teachings, a necessary shadow to balance the newly restored light. We must learn from the joy and the loss in equal measure, she told her first circle of apprentices. A memory that brings only pride is a dangerous fiction. A memory that includes sorrow is a shield, but the city, still basking in the tree's renewed brilliance, resisted the shadow. Whispers began to circulate, first in the market squares, then in the council chambers. Why speak of drowning and ruin? Some citizens argued, their voices laced with a new kind of fear. We have just regained our light. This dark tale will only frighten our children and dim the hope we fought so hard to rekindle. A subtle divide opened in the community between those who saw wisdom in the full, unvarnished truth and those who wanted to protect their fragile, new beginning from a past they deemed too tragic to bear. Elara saw the fracture forming and knew she could not let it widen. To simply argue would only entrench their fears. They needed to feel the truth, not just hear it. She announced a new kind of ceremony, one where all of Gondor's history, from the highest peak of victory to the deepest abyss of loss, would be openly acknowledged before the White Tree. It would be a weaving, she explained, not a mourning. We will ask the tree to hold our entire story, so its light can be made stronger and wiser by the full truth of all it has witnessed. The air in the courtyard was thick with anticipation, a quiet hum of shared purpose. Alara stood before the White Tree, no longer as a rebel, but as a guide, and she asked the people of Gondor to bring their histories forward. They came not with grand weapons or royal decrees, but with the fragile treasures of their own lineages. An old soldier laid a worn shield at the tree's base, its dents telling a story of a desperate, forgotten defense. A young mother placed a lullaby, its notes passed down through generations, into a silver bowl. Each artifact, each whispered story, was a thread offered to the whole. With every contribution, the tree responded. Its silver light did not just brighten, it deepened, weaving the colors of countless lives into its radiance, until the tree itself became a living tapestry of Gondor's entire heritage, beautiful and complex. Then a voice cut through the unity. "You ask us to share everything," an elderly woman named Iareth declared, her hands clenched. "My grandfather lost his entire family in the plague years. That memory is a wound, not a thread. Why must we reopen it?" A murmur of agreement came from a small group of traditionalists who saw this new openness as a dangerous unraveling of the peace they had known. Elara approached Iareth, her voice soft but unwavering. "A tapestry woven only of gold thread is beautiful, but it is frail," she said. "It is the dark threads, the ones of sorrow and resilience, that give it strength and keep it from tearing. We do not honor the pain by forgetting it. We honor the strength it forged. Will you trust me with this memory?" Iareth, her eyes glistening, finally nodded. She spoke of the silence that fell over her childhood home, of the empty chairs at the table. As her story joined the others, the tree's light pulsed, not with a flash, but with a profound, steady warmth that seemed to acknowledge the sacrifice. The ground itself seemed to sigh in relief. The tree's roots, visible at the base, glowed with a deeper, richer light and seemed to extend further into the earth, a visible sign that the city's very foundations were being reinforced by this act of total remembrance. As the last story was shared and the ceremony drew to a close, Alara looked up. High above, on the tree's newest and highest branch, a single blossom had begun to glow with a faint, distinctly golden light, a hue never seen before, hinting at a story not yet told. The golden blossom became a beacon, a silent question hanging from the highest branch. For days, Elara watched it, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. She had never feared the open sky, but the sheer, dizzying height of the White Tree was a different kind of challenge. The climb was an act of pure trust, her fingers finding holds in the luminous bark that felt both solid and alive. Each upward movement was a battle against the vertigo that threatened to pull her backward into the void. The air grew thinner, the courtyard below shrinking into a mosaic of tiny, upturned faces. Finally, she reached the golden branch. It was not wood, but something closer to solidified light, cool and smooth beneath her hands. And there, nestled where the blossom had been, was a single fruit. It was not like any apple or pear. It was a crystalline orb, perfectly clear, and within its heart pulsed a light that felt immeasurably ancient, a rhythm far older than the tree she clung to. This was a memory from a time before Gondor, a seed of something primordial. The branch trembled with her slightest movement, a fragile twig supporting a treasure. One misstep, one shift in balance, and she could fall, or worse, send the fruit shattering to the stones far below. Every instinct screamed to secure it, to take this impossible artifact to the safety of the library for study. But as she watched the light pulse within the crystal, a deeper understanding settled over her. This was not hers to take. It was a promise still being written. To pluck it now would be to interrupt a sentence in the middle. With a reverence that stilled her trembling limbs, she made the difficult choice. She would leave it. She would protect it from this new height, trusting the tree itself to nurture this final gift to maturity. As she began her careful descent, a flash of iridescent color caught her eye. A bird, its feathers the color of captured moonlight, swooped past her and alighted on the golden branch. Then another came, and another, their songs a melody no one in the city had heard for centuries. They were the Silverbills, birds of legend, drawn back to a home they had abandoned when the light began to fail. They circled the crystalline fruit, their presence a silent testament to a renewal that was spreading beyond the city walls, touching the very fabric of the natural world. Watching them weave through the branches, Alara felt a profound shift within herself. Her fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable certainty. She was not just a keeper of memory. She was a witness to a story that was only just beginning to unfold. The Silverbills wove their nests from strands of the tree's own light, their melodies a soft counterpoint to the hum of the ancient roots. Where their songs echoed, a quiet miracle unfolded across the city. Gardens, long tended with little result, suddenly burst with blossoms of sapphire blue and silver, flowers whose names had been lost to history. The very air seemed to shimmer, tasting of rain-washed stone and a vitality that had been absent for generations. A deep, pervasive calm settled over the streets, soothing frayed tempers and lifting weary hearts without a single word being spoken. Yet this very peace became a source of fear for some. They are a beautiful distraction, a councilman named Barian argued, his voice tight with suspicion as he stood before Elara. They lull us into a dream while our defenses are neglected. What if their song makes us forget the harsh lessons of the past? Others whispered of old legends that spoke of luminous birds as messengers of great change, and change to them was always a terrifying unknown. They demanded Alara find a way to limit the bird's influence, to control the very magic she had helped unleash. Instead of arguing, Alara spent her days sitting beneath the branches, listening. She discovered the birds were not mere singers, they were living chronicles. Their complex melodies were layered with history, each trill a forgotten name, each chorus the rhythm of an ancient battle or a quiet moment of peace. They were preserving memory in its purest form, a language of feeling that bypassed the need for scrolls or speeches. Do not try to silence them, she urged the worried citizens. Try to understand them. Listen not with your ears, but with your heart. The proof of her words came from the city's children. They gathered under the tree, their faces upturned, and without any formal teaching, they began to recite epic poems of lost heroes and sing ballads in languages no one had spoken for 1,000 years. The knowledge was flowing directly from the birdsong into their open, receptive minds, spreading wisdom faster than any scholar could hope to achieve. Seeing this, a new purpose crystallized for Alara. She ordered simple benches and tables to be placed in the dappled light beneath the silver leaves, creating an open-air school where the very air was a teacher. Here, the children's lessons were interwoven with the Silverbills' songs, history becoming a living melody that they could feel in their bones. The School of Echoes was not built of stone, but of sound and light. Each morning, Elara and her apprentices gathered the city's children in the dappled shade of the white tree. They did not teach with dusty scrolls alone, but by encouraging the young ones to listen to the Silverbills' melodies. A child would hum a fragment of a bird's song, and the tree's light would pulse, projecting faint, shimmering images of the events being sung. A king signing a treaty, a farmer discovering a new well. History was no longer a subject to be memorized, but a living tapestry to be felt and experienced. The children developed an instinctive bond with their heritage, their young minds absorbing the nuances of ancient diplomacy, the rhythms of old crafts, and the cadence of forgotten languages. Some discovered a startling talent for recounting epic tales with perfect clarity, while others found they could calm a crying infant or soothe an anxious elder with a single, softly sung verse. This beautiful focus, however, was seen by some as a dangerous distraction. A severe drought settled upon the outer farmlands, withering crops and turning irrigation canals to cracked earth. The farmers, their faces etched with worry, came to the citadel with desperate pleas. A faction of the city's practical-minded citizens, led by the councilman Barian, pointed an accusing finger at the School of Echoes. You pour all your energy into songs and stories while the land itself dies, he argued publicly, his voice sharp with frustration. The trees' glow cannot fill our granaries. We have traded common sense for magic. Elara knew that to argue would only deepen the divide. Instead, she saw a different path. She gathered the children and led them to the tree's base. Today, we do not ask the tree to show us the past, she told them. We ask it to help us with the present. We will combine our memory of the land's abundance with our need for its renewal. The children formed a circle, their small hands linked, and began a simple, rhythmic chant, not of kings, but of rain and roots and flowing streams. They poured their collective memory of green, thriving fields into the ritual, a direct and heartfelt plea for guidance. In response, the white tree's glow did not brighten in the air, but deepened within the earth. A low, resonant hum traveled through the soil, a vibration felt in the soles of their feet. Deep below the citadel, the tree's vast, luminous roots began to pulse with a fierce, blue-white light. They acted as channels, not for memory, but for water, drawing upon deep, hidden aquifers and guiding the life, giving flow through subterranean stone, directly to the parched roots of the farmlands miles away. Within a day, the farmers reported a miracle. Their wells, once dry, were now brimming with cool, clear water, and the soil was dark and moist. A procession of grateful farmers soon arrived at the courtyard, not with accusations, but with offerings of the first saved seedlings and jars of fresh honey. As they laid their gifts at the base of the tree, Alara looked out past the city walls. She saw a faint, silver-green luminescence shimmering in the distant fields, a gentle light that clung to the newly watered crops. The tree's power was not confined to the citadel. Its glow was now extending to the land itself, a visible bond between memory and life, between the kingdom's heart and its sustenance. The glowing fields were only the beginning. Alara followed the silver-green luminescence, tracing it like a river of light back to its source, the White Trees' vast, subterranean root system. She walked for miles beyond the city walls, and everywhere the roots traveled, they awakened the land. Forgotten groves, where trees had stood barren for centuries, now shimmered with leaves of soft silver. Ancient wells, long thought dry, brimmed with water that gleamed with an inner light. It was a network, a living web of memory and vitality that stretched across the countryside, silently strengthening the very soil of Gondor. Where the light touched, the land remembered its own fertility, and the borders of the kingdom were no longer marked by stone walls, but by this gentle, pervasive radiance. But light, however benevolent, draws attention. Scouts returned to the citadel with mixed reports from neighboring realms. Some looked upon the glowing hills with wonder, sending curious messengers to ask about the strange and beautiful magic. Others watched with deep suspicion. Armored patrols were seen gathering along the mountain passes, their commanders wary of a power they could not understand. Whispers spread of a Gondor growing too strong, its influence rooted in something more than swords and soldiers. The very magic that healed the land was being interpreted as a threat. Elara saw the danger of this misunderstanding. To her, the solution was clear. We must not guard this light, she advised the council. We must share it. She proposed a daring act of diplomacy. Envoys would be sent not with threats or treaties, but with gifts. Young saplings cultivated from the White Tree's own fruit, each one a vessel of shared memory and peace. It was a risk. If the saplings failed to take root in foreign soil, it would be seen as a sign that Gondor's magic was weak or false. If they thrived, it would prove the light was not for Gondor alone, but belonged to all who valued remembrance. The first sapling was sent to the rugged hill folk of the neighboring realm of Runeville, a people known for their pride and isolation. For weeks, there was only tense silence. Then, a single rider approached the gates of Minas Tirith, his standard flying not in challenge, but in salute. The sapling had not merely survived, it had flourished, its roots drinking deep from the stony soil of Runeville and glowing with the same soft light as its parent tree. More than that, it had begun to sing a low, harmonic hum that resonated with the local legends and heroes of the hill folk, remembering their history as if it were its own. The gesture transformed suspicion into a fragile trust, opening the way for new alliances built on a foundation of shared stories. With this success, Alara's role within Gondor evolved once more. She was no longer just the keeper of memory for the city, but a key advisor to the ruling council on matters that stretched across the known world. Her understanding of the past became their guide for the future, her voice a steady presence in halls of power where the fate of nations was decided. The council chamber, a cavernous hall of dark stone, had always been a place of guarded words and measured alliances. Elara entered not with scrolls of law, but with the quiet authority of one who had walked in the memories of kings. When a dispute over northern trade routes threatened to sever ties with a distant mountain tribe, she did not cite ledgers. Instead, she stood and closed her eyes, asking the White Tree to show her the truth of the conflict. A vision bloomed in the air between the arguing factions, a shimmering image of a chieftain from ages past, his hand clasped in friendship with a Gondorian lord, their pact sealed not with gold, but with a shared oath to protect the high passes. The current chieftain, a stern man named Borin, stared in stunned silence. The lord in the vision was his own forgotten ancestor. The argument over tariffs dissolved in an instant, replaced by the resurrection of a bond far more valuable than coin. Not every council member welcomed this new form of counsel. Lord Valmir, a man whose family had long held power through carefully kept secrets, slammed his fist on the table. "We are not children to be guided by fairy lights and phantoms," he declared, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "A kingdom is ruled by strength and strategy, not the whispers of a tree." Elara met his anger not with defiance, but with a calm practicality. "The tree does not command," she replied. "It reminds. It shows us the outcomes of past strategies, the roots of old hatreds, and the foundations of lasting peace. Our strength is magnified, not diminished, by understanding the full weight of our history." She began to deliberately weave the tree's insights with the council's traditional maps and census data, showing how a memory of a past famine could inform a new grain storage policy, or how an ancient betrayal could illuminate the risks of a proposed military alliance. During these moments of synthesis, a remarkable thing would occur. The white tree's glow, visible through the chamber's high windows, would brighten perceptibly, its light seeming to steady tempers and sharpen minds, guiding the debate away from petty squabbles and toward a longer, wiser view. After a season of such sessions, leading to unprecedented stability, Alara felt the pull of her true calling. She left the politics of the chamber behind and walked into the moonlit courtyard, seeking the familiar solace of the tree's roots. But a tall, cloaked figure was already there, one hand resting gently on the luminous bark, as if in silent conversation. The stranger turned, his face hidden in shadow, and spoke her name with an accent she had never heard. The stranger lowered his hood, revealing eyes the color of a winter sky, and a face etched by winds from lands Alara had only seen in the tree's oldest memories. "My name is Kalin," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I come from the gray peaks, from a people who have long guarded a tree of our own. It is the Heartwood of the West, and its light, which has held our history for 10,000 years, is now dying." Elara felt the ground shift beneath her, not in tremor, but in understanding. The White Tree of Gondor was not unique. It was a single thread in a vast, global tapestry of memory, a network she had never dreamed existed. Kalin's plea was simple and desperate. He asked for her help, for the knowledge she had fought so hard to reclaim, but a cold knot of doubt tightened in her chest. Could they risk it? Gondor's own renewal was still fragile, a sapling itself. To share their hard-won wisdom, to send their keeper away on a perilous journey, felt like tempting the very darkness they had just escaped. She took the question not to the council, but to the people, standing once more in the tree's luminous shadow. "We were once the ones who asked for help," she reminded them. "We were the ones whose light was failing. Will we now be the ones who refuse to answer that same call?" The response was not a roar, but a deep, resonant hum of agreement that seemed to vibrate from the citizens directly into the tree's roots. The white tree itself seemed to answer, its light pulsing with a steady, confident rhythm that washed away Alara's hesitation. The decision was made. She would lead an expedition to the Grey Peaks. The journey would take them through the treacherous passes of the Earth Tremors and into territories unmapped and wild, where ancient things were said to sleep. The fate of an entire realm's memory, of all the stories and wisdom held in that distant Heartwood, now rested on their success. As the first light of dawn touched the white city, Alara stood at its gate. Her pack held provisions, a bundle of luminous saplings to gift, and the scrolls of remembrance. Behind her, the White Tree of Gondor shone with a brilliant, focused light, its glow reaching out to illuminate the path ahead like a promise kept across the ages. The mountain pass was a knife's edge of crumbling stone and biting wind. Alara clutched the sapling's protective case, its faint silver glow their only lantern against the oppressive dark. The light did more than show the path. It revealed what was not there, casting a soft luminescence over hidden crevices and unstable ledges just before a boot would have fallen. It was a sentient guide, and they learned to trust its subtle dimming and brightening with their lives. During a brief rest, one of her companions brushed snow from a sheer rock face and gasped. Etched into the stone were intricate patterns of two trees, their roots entwined, their branches forming a single canopy. This was the story Kalin had hinted at, a forgotten alliance between the Heartwood of the West and the White Tree of Gondor, a bond so old it had been erased from all their records. A low rumble, deep and menacing, cut through their wonder. The mountain itself seemed to shudder. A torrent of rock and ice broke free from the cliff above, a deafening avalanche that tore through their line. Elara was thrown backward, the world dissolving into a chaos of tumbling stone and blinding white. When the dust settled, the silence was absolute. She was alone, buried to her waist in debris, the cries of her companions swallowed by the vast, uncaring peaks. Her only companion was the sapling, still cradled in her arms. Its light was flickering, growing weaker in the thin, lifeless air. Pushing herself free, she faced a terrible choice. Try to find the others, a near impossible task in the labyrinthine passes, or trust the pull she now felt from the sapling, a gentle but insistent tug toward a sheer rock wall that seemed to offer no passage. She chose the tree. Stumbling toward the wall, she saw it was not solid. A narrow fissure, invisible from more than a few feet away, split the rock. The sapling's glow pulsed with a faint, desperate rhythm as she squeezed into the tight space, the stone scraping against her shoulders. She was committing to a path with no guarantee of an exit, guided only by a dying light. With every labored breath, the sapling dimmed further, its silver hue fading to a sickly gray. The memory it carried, the very essence it needed to share, was suffocating in the high altitude. Panic clawed at her throat. If the light went out completely, she would be lost in the dark, and a vital piece of the world's history would be extinguished forever. She had to find a way to feed it, to give it a reason to burn again. The fissure opened abruptly, spilling her into a hidden valley, cradled between the towering peaks. And there, in its center, was a spring. Its waters did not merely reflect the weak sun, they shimmered with their own internal, silver-green light, a perfect mirror of the white tree's own radiant glow. The water of the spring did not simply ripple, it seemed to breathe with a soft, living light. Elara knelt, her hands trembling, and gently placed the faltering sapling into the luminous pool. The moment its roots touched the water, they drank, not like a plant, but like a soul taking a first, gasping breath after being submerged. The gray pallor vanished, replaced by a brilliant, vibrant silver that pulsed in time with the spring's own rhythm. The light climbed from the roots to the very tip of the single new leaf, which unfurled with an audible sigh of relief. This was no mere mountain pool. It was a wellspring, a beating heart in the vast, hidden network that connected the world's memory trees. Its waters were pure, condensed remembrance, and a single sip filled Alara with a clarity and strength she had not felt since leaving Gondor. But she was not alone. Figures emerged from the surrounding pines, silent and stern. They were the guardians of this place, clad in robes the color of stone and moss, their eyes holding the deep, patient watchfulness of the mountains themselves. Their leader, a woman named Anya, stepped forward, her voice as crisp as the mountain air. "You trespass on sacred ground, outsider. The life you hold is not yours to command." Explain this intrusion. Elara did not reach for a weapon, but instead opened her empty hands in a gesture of peace. She spoke of Gondor, of its own white tree that had faded into silence, and of the long, difficult journey to rekindle its light. She told them of her city's fear and its eventual awakening, and of Kalin's desperate plea. "I carry no command, only an offer," she said, her voice steady. "I carry a piece of my home's renewed memory, not to take from your spring, but to share with your Heartwood. As a token of this, I would leave this sapling with you, so our stories may grow together." She gestured to the now brilliantly glowing young tree, resting in the spring. The guardians exchanged looks, their stern expressions softening into contemplation. Anya approached the spring, her own hand hovering over the water. She then cupped it, drinking deeply, and closed her eyes as if listening to a distant song. When she opened them, she nodded slowly. "We have felt the silence from the gray peaks," she admitted, "and we have felt the new song from the south. Your story rings true. Your gift is accepted." With their acceptance, the spring itself seemed to respond. The flow from its source increased, the water bubbling with a new, joyful energy. The light within it brightened, and Alara felt a palpable surge in the connection between the sapling in the spring and the parent tree in far-off Gondor, a strengthened thread in the web of memory. Anya and her people now became her guides, leading her from the hidden valley onto paths known only to them. The way forward was no longer a desperate gamble, but a purposeful journey, with new allies at her side, and the certainty that every step was mending a break in the world's oldest story. The air in the eastern grove tasted of old sorrow. Elara stood before their Heartwood, a tree that should have been a pillar of light, but its branches drooped under the weight of a silent, gray pallor. The people moved around it with averted eyes, their songs quiet, their stories clipped and careful. They were not a people who had forgotten their past, she realized, but a people trapped by it, holding a single, terrible memory at arm's length until it poisoned everything. The local chieftain, a grim man named Torvin, confirmed her fears with a weary gesture. "Our tree does not teach us, it haunts us," he said, his voice rough. "It shows only the fall of the sunstone, the day our greatest treasure was lost and our king fell. To ask it for anything else is to invite that pain back into our hearts." Elara understood their fear, but she saw the deeper sickness. The memory was not being processed. It was being preserved in a state of perpetual, unresolved grief, a wound that never closed. When she suggested using her Gondorian sapling to create a bridge, to let a different kind of memory flow into their tree, Torvin's skepticism was a wall. "You would pour strange light into our sacred root," he challenged, his counsel murmuring in agreement. "We know our pain. Your hope is an unknown, and the unknown has always brought us ruin. She knew then that argument was useless. They needed to see, not be told. Without asking for permission, she walked to the base of the listless Heartwood and placed the glowing sapling from Gondor into the earth beside its ancient roots. She did not force a connection. She simply opened a pathway, her own will a gentle conduit. At first, nothing happened. Then, a single thread of silver light, fine as a spider's silk, stretched from the vibrant sapling to touch the gray bark of the elder tree. The Heartwood shuddered. A cascade of images erupted not as a vision, but as a shared feeling that washed over the entire grove. It was not the fall of the sunstone. It was the memory of Gondor's own renewal, the collective joy of its people, the warmth of a shared victory against despair. The two trees began to pulse in unison, a slow, steady rhythm like a second heartbeat. Color returned to the eastern tree's leaves, shifting from gray to a soft, budding green. A sigh seemed to move through the crowd, a release of breath held for generations. But the healing came with a price. As the light between the trees intensified, the very ground beneath them grew cold. The dormant sorrow of the land, the grief that had been buried but never mourned, now rose to the surface. The air thickened with a palpable sense of loss, and the joyful memories from Gondor began to flicker, threatened by this deeper, older anguish. In that moment, the merging lights created a window, and through it, Alara saw everything. She saw the sunstone not as a mere gem, but as a vessel of their people's unity, shattered not by an enemy, but in a moment of tragic internal strife. The tree had been replaying the catastrophe, but it had forgotten the cause, trapping the people in the symptom without showing them the disease. To truly break the cycle, they would have to face the whole, terrible truth together. The shared glow revealed a truth more painful than any battlefield defeat. The eastern tree's sickness was not born from a lost war, but from a broken promise. Generations ago, their leaders had turned their backs on a neighboring kingdom in its hour of greatest need, abandoning an ancient ally to a terrible fate out of pure, calculated fear. This act of betrayal had been carefully erased from their official histories, but the land itself had never forgotten. The memory of that cowardice had festered in the tree's roots like a hidden poison, dimming its light and wrapping the people in a shroud of isolation and unspoken shame. The tree was not just fading, it was withering from the inside out, burdened by a lie its own children were forced to uphold. Elara knew that healing this wound would require more than a transfer of light. It would demand a profound and painful act of honesty. She had to convince the current leaders to publicly acknowledge a failure that had defined their rule for centuries. She went to Chieftain Torvin and his council, not with accusation, but with shared vulnerability. She told them of Gondor's own great failing, of the time its people chose to forget their own history, to lock away their past out of fear, and how that choice had nearly extinguished their own white tree forever. She spoke of the difficult, humbling process of public remembrance, of how admitting their collective failure had not weakened them, but had become the very source of their renewed strength. We believed our pride was our foundation, she told the solemn leaders, but we learned that a foundation built on a hidden crack will always crumble. True strength is found in the courage to repair the crack, no matter how deep it goes. Torvin and his council wrestled with this for a day and a night. To agree was to risk their authority, to admit that the legacy they protected was built on a sin of omission. But the alternative was to watch their Heartwood and their people slowly fade into a gray and silent oblivion. The stakes could not be higher. The choice was between the comfort of a familiar lie and the difficult hope of a painful truth. Finally, Torvin emerged, his face etched with a new resolve. "We will hold the ceremony," he declared. The leaders agreed to a public ritual of apology, a direct address to the tree and the spirits of the betrayed ally. As they gathered in the grove, the air was thick with a tense, fearful silence. Torvin stepped forward, and instead of a proud speech, he began to speak the long-buried names of the abandoned kingdom. He confessed to the betrayal, not as a historical event, but as a living wound in the soul of his people. His voice, initially halting, grew stronger with each word, as if he were shedding a great weight. And as he spoke, something miraculous happened. The gray pallor that clung to the Heartwood began to peel away like old bark. A warm, golden light, unseen for generations, pulsed from its core, climbing the branches until the entire tree shone with a clear, strong radiance. The light was not the silver of Gondor, but its own unique hue, the true color of its restored honor. The ceremony ended not with cheers, but with a profound, collective sigh of relief. With the eastern tree restored and a new bond forged, Elara began to pack for the long journey back to Gondor, her heart full. But on her final night in the grove, as she slept beside the now vibrant Heartwood, a new vision seized her. It was not a single memory, but a map of the world painted in light and shadow. She saw other points of distant, fading luminescence, other trees in other lands, their lights guttering like candles in a storm. Her work was not over. One tree had been saved, but an entire forest was still waiting in the dark. A new constellation bloomed across the world's darkened spirit. As the eastern Heartwood's golden light stabilized, a brilliant pulse shot from its core, arcing across the unseen pathways of the world. Far to the south, in a jungle city carved from obsidian, a tree of twisted, dark wood suddenly ignited with emerald fire. In the frozen north, a crystalline sapling buried in ice began to hum, its light piercing the permafrost like a blue star. Each awakening sent its own pulse back through the network, a symphony of restored memories that made the very air vibrate with a chorus of returned voices. Elara felt it all, a dizzying influx of joy, sorrow, and triumph from 100 different cultures. Her purpose, once focused on a single white tree in a white city, shattered and reformed into something vastly larger. She was a steward now, a guardian for the entire, breathing tapestry of the world's shared past. This new role immediately created a painful tension. Messengers from Gondor reached her, their words polite, but their eyes worried. They brought reports that some in the council, Lord Valmir chief among them, were voicing concerns. They asked if the keeper of their memory had forgotten her own home in her zeal to heal others. The accusation stung because it held a grain of truth. How could she be everywhere at once? The solution came to her not as a single idea, but as an echo of the network itself. She would not be the only keeper. In each land she visited, she sought out the most promising minds, the quiet scholar, the intuitive storyteller, the elder who knew the old songs. She gathered them and began to train them, not in a rigid doctrine, but in the principles she had learned through struggle. She taught them how to listen to their trees, how to conduct the rituals of shared remembrance, and how to interpret the flow of light and memory. She was creating a circle of guardians, a distributed council of wisdom that could sustain the network even if she fell. Just as this new system began to take root, the network delivered a terrifying warning. It came not as a joyful pulse, but as a jarring, discordant shock. One of the newly awakened trees, a vibrant cedar in a western archipelago, suddenly screamed across the psychic web. Its light didn't just fade, it was violently torn away, leaving behind a void of absolute silence, a hole in the world's memory that felt like a physical wound. Through the shuddering connection, Alara perceived the source of this erasure, a chilling, calculated force that fed on oblivion. This was no natural decay or simple fear. It was a conscious enemy, an entity that understood that to control the future, it must first annihilate the past. Its sole purpose was to unmake history, to dim the trees forever and leave the world a blank slate, ripe for domination. The implications were immediate and terrifying. If this force could so easily extinguish one tree, it could hunt the others, and it would, without a doubt, seek out the heart of the network, the source from which all this renewed light had originally flowed. Her own white tree in Gondor was not just a symbol anymore, it was the linchpin. Its brilliant, concentrated power was both the greatest beacon and the most vital target. The defense of every memory in every land would be decided there. Without a moment's hesitation, Alara turned her back on the Eastern Grove, her heart a tumult of duty and dread. She began the frantic journey home, racing against an unseen enemy that wanted to plunge the entire world into eternal, silent night. A cold shadow began to bleed from the forgotten lands. It was not a darkness of night, but something deeper, a void that drank light and memory alike. The first sign was a gentle dimming in the northern woods, where a keeper awoke to find he could no longer recall his own daughter's name. Panic spread faster than the gloom itself. In coastal villages, fishermen forgot the patterns of the tides, leaving their boats grounded. In bustling cities, artisans stared at their tools, the knowledge of their crafts slipping from their minds like water through open fingers. The most terrifying loss was the bonds between people, as shared memories of kindness and love were the first to fray and vanish. The network of trees, so recently vibrant, began to flicker under the assault, and the guardians she had trained found their own resolve crumbling, their sense of purpose fading into a fog of confusion. Elara felt the network's distress like a physical chill. She stood in the courtyard of Minas Tirith, her hand on the white tree's bark, and felt the shadow's hunger. It was a conscious force, feeding on oblivion, and it was hunting. Her first instinct was to fortify her own tree, to pull all the light back to Gondor in a desperate act of self-preservation. But she knew that would be a fatal mistake. To save one tree was to lose the war. Instead, she reached out through the trembling web of light, her voice a beacon in the growing mental silence. She rallied the keepers, not with commands, but with a shared memory of their first success, the brilliant joy they had felt when the eastern Heartwood bloomed with golden light. She asked them to pour that specific memory, that feeling of triumphant renewal, into their own trees, to use it as a foundation to build a collective shield. The White Tree of Gondor became the anchor for this defense. Elara delved into its most ancient roots, past the tales of kings, and into the raw, foundational memories of the world itself. She did not seek memories of power, but of persistence. She found the unyielding hope of a seed pushing through frozen ground after a long winter. She found the quiet resilience of a river patiently carving a canyon over 1,000,000 years. These were the memories she wove together, creating a shield not of brute force, but of enduring truth, a declaration that life and memory would always find a way. But the shadow adapted. As the shield solidified, the gloom intensified its assault, and it found a new, insidious target, Elara herself. Visions assaulted her mind, not of mythical horrors, but of her own deepest doubts. She saw herself failing in the mountain pass, the sapling shattering on the rocks while her companions perished. She heard the scornful voice of Lord Valmir, accusing her of abandoning her home for a futile quest. The shadow whispered that her entire journey was arrogance, that she had only awakened these trees to make them targets, that she was the cause of this very destruction. The emotional weight was crippling, each vision feeling more real than the stone beneath her feet, threatening to unravel her concentration and break the shield. The choice was stark. She could retreat inward, battling these private demons while the network fell, or she could stand firm and accept them. She made her decision at the base of the white tree, its light a steady pulse against the creeping dread. She did not fight the visions or try to suppress her fears. Instead, she acknowledged them. She let the memory of her failure on the mountain exist alongside the memory of her salvation at the spring. She allowed Valmir's accusation to sit beside the grateful tears of the Eastern people. She held all of it, the doubt and the certainty, the failure and the triumph, and she fed it all into the shield. The shadow's power was negation, but her strength was in integration. By refusing to disown any part of her story, she robbed the gloom of its weapon. Standing firm, with the living history of the world flowing through her, she turned her focus outward, ready to trace the shadow back to its sterile, heartless source. The landscape was a wound in the world. Alara stood at the edge of a vast, colorless plain, where the very air was thick with the taste of ash and forgotten tears. This was the source of the gloom, the place where an ancient tree of sorrow had once grown, a tree born not of hope, but of a grief so profound it had never been allowed to heal. Long ago, it had been cut down, its memory suppressed, but its poisoned roots still festered beneath the soil, radiating a pain that seeped out to dim the entire network. The stump remained, a blackened, twisted scar in the earth, pulsing with a cold, silent anguish that made Alara's own heart ache. To heal the world, she had to heal this first and oldest wound. The gloom did not attack with claws or teeth, but with her own mind. As she stepped onto the barren ground, visions rose around her. She saw the White Tree of Gondor dying, its light extinguished forever because of her failure. She felt the cold of the mountain pass again, the crushing loneliness as her companions were lost. She heard the scornful words of her doubters, each one a sharp blade of truth. The entity fed on these memories, amplifying every moment of loss and fear, trying to convince her that her hope was a foolish, fleeting thing. Why fight when the end is only sorrow? The shadows seemed to whisper, "Your efforts only prolong the pain." Her spirit wavered, the weight of every setback she had ever faced pressing down on her, threatening to crush her will into dust. In that moment of absolute despair, She made her choice. She would not fight the memories. She would answer them with a final, defiant act of creation. From her pack, she took her last remaining treasure, the final sapling from Gondor, its silver leaves flickering weakly in the oppressive dark. This was her last hope, the last piece of her home's light. She knelt before the blackened stump, her hands shaking as she began to dig into the hard, unforgiving soil with her bare hands. The earth was cold and lifeless, resistant to her touch. As she placed the sapling into the shallow hole, she did not command it to grow. Instead, she opened herself completely. She poured into it not just her own memories, but every memory the network had ever shared with her. She gave it the joy of the eastern grove's golden dawn, the steadfast resilience of the mountain spring, the collective faith of her people in Gondor's courtyard. She channeled the entire chorus of the world's remembered past into this one fragile point of light. The cost was immediate and devastating. Her own strength flowed out of her, a visible silver stream, leaving her body and pouring into the struggling sapling. She felt herself fading, her vision dimming, her body growing cold. The sapling trembled, its roots seeking purchase in the bleak soil, its light guttering like a candle in a storm. It was a battle between a vast, ancient sorrow and a single, concentrated point of hope. As Alara collapsed to her knees, her last breath a whisper on the air, the sapling's roots finally found their grip. They dug deep, piercing through the layers of pain and touching something pure beneath. A brilliant, blinding light erupted from the tiny tree, a silent detonation of pure memory that shot across the plain. The wave of light did not destroy the gloom, it transformed it. The blackened stump shimmered and then dissolved, its ancient grief finally acknowledged and released. The barren earth softened, and for the first time in ages, a single blade of green grass pushed its way toward the sky. The sapling did not merely grow, it erupted. Silver roots tore through the barren ground, and a trunk of pure light spiraled upward, its branches unfurling into a canopy that shimmered with the entire history of the world. As the young white tree bloomed, its radiance washed over the wasteland in a wave of tangible memory. The gray earth softened into rich, black soil. Color seeped back into the world, and a new grove, vibrant and fertile, spread from that single point of defiance, healing the land's oldest scar. Across the continents, the oppressive gloom shattered and receded. In the jungle city, the emerald fire of the obsidian tree blazed with untamed joy. In the frozen north, the crystalline sapling hummed a triumphant crystalline song. Every connected tree, from the smallest sapling to the ancient heartwoods, glowed with a renewed, purer light, their stored memories flowing with a clarity that had been lost for ages. But at the center of this miracle, Elara lay broken. The cost of her final offering had been nearly everything. She was stranded, her body frail, and her spirit stretched thin, watching the new tree's glory from the cool grass. She had saved the network, but she could not save herself. Yet the tree she had created would not abandon its creator. Its light, now a permanent fixture in the global web, acted as a beacon. Far to the east, the keeper of the Golden Heart, Wood felt the surge and, through the shared connection, perceived Alara's profound weakness. He immediately gathered a rescue party, their path illuminated not by the sun, but by the psychic pull of the new grove, guiding them unerringly to her side. When they found her, she was too weak to stand. but her mind was clear. Seeing the reverence in the eyes of her rescuers, she knew this newborn grove needed a guardian. With the last of her strength, she appointed one of the Eastern rescuers, a young woman named Elara, who had shown a deep empathy for the land's pain, as the first keeper of the Grove of Dawn. This place of ultimate sorrow would now be a permanent sanctuary for healing, ensuring that no memory would ever be locked away in darkness again. With the network now complete and balanced, a final, collective pulse echoed through it. This was not just a restoration of light, but an unveiling. Lost technologies of sustainable farming, forgotten architectural techniques that harmonize with the land, and profound artistic philosophies flowed freely between the trees, offering practical gifts that could elevate every connected realm into a new age of prosperity. Gently carried on a litter by her eastern allies, Alara began the long journey home. As they crested the final hill and the white city of Minas Tirith came into view, she saw it. The White Tree of Gondor was no longer just a source of light. Against the twilight sky, it shone with the intensity of a captured star, its brilliant silver radiance a joyful, triumphant welcome, calling its keeper back to the heart of the world she had saved. The white city shone like a promise against the sky, its towers bathed in the silver light of a tree that now burned with the intensity of a star. Alara's return was met not with cheers, but with a profound, reverent silence. The people lined the streets, their faces upturned, and as she passed, the white tree's glow pulsed in a slow, rhythmic cadence, a heartbeat of pure joy that washed over the citadel. It was a welcome that needed no words. In the great hall, before the gathered council and citizens, she was given a new title, Archkeeper of the Memory Network. Her duty would no longer be to one city, but to the entire, breathing tapestry of trees she had helped restore, a role that would carry her across the known world to nurture their fragile, growing light. This honor, however, came with a piercing conflict. To safeguard the world, she had to leave her home. Gondor could not be allowed to slip back into isolation, its connection to its own past dependent on a single, wandering soul. She needed to plant a guardian here, just as she had in distant groves. Her choice fell upon Kalin, the quietest of her apprentices. He was not the most eloquent, but he possessed a deep, intuitive patience, the kind that could listen to the slow stories told by roots and stone. She began his training in earnest, passing on not just the rituals from Maldir's scrolls, but the harder-won wisdom of the heart. She taught him how to hold a memory of sorrow without being broken by it, and how to channel a moment of joy into a light that could heal. "You are not its master," she told him, her hand resting on the tree's luminous bark. "You are its partner. Your task is to ensure the people never forget how to listen." On the morning of her departure, as the first light touched the courtyard, a final miracle occurred. The tree's singular, crystalline fruit, now fully ripe with the world's restored memories, detached from its branch. It did not fall, but drifted gently to the earth, planting itself in the soil beside the ancient trunk. A new sapling, its leaves already edged in silver, pushed from the ground moments later. The cycle was secure. The memory of Gondor would live on, not in one tree, but in a grove. As Alara prepared to walk through the city gates, she paused, turning back for a final moment. She placed her palm against the white tree's trunk, closing her eyes. A river of memories flowed into her, not as a torrent, but as a gentle, sustaining current. The scent of rain on white stone, the sound of a child's laughter, the quiet wisdom of an old librarian, and the steadfast courage of a people who had chosen to remember. It was not a goodbye, but a blessing, and she carried it with her as she stepped onto the road, her path illuminated by the interconnected glow of a world she had taught to sing its own story once more. The road carried her from one glowing heart to the next. Elara walked the length of the world, her journey a quiet pilgrimage to each tree in the network. In the jungle city, she learned the cedar's song of rain, a melody that taught its people the precise moment to plant and harvest. In the northern wastes, she deciphered the crystalline hum that predicted the shifting of the ice, allowing settlements to move before the great glaciers groaned and fell. These were not just stories, they were living sciences, practical wisdom born from a land's long memory. She did not arrive as a teacher, but as a student, sitting with each keeper to listen, to understand the unique rhythm of their tree's light. Some, like the stern guardian of a mountain pine, were deeply skeptical. Why should we share our secrets with outsiders? He challenged, his arms crossed. Our ancestors guarded this light for a reason. Elara did not argue with force. Instead, she invited him to witness a simple exchange. She showed him how the memory of a flood from the coastlands, carried through the network, allowed his own people to reinforce a riverbank days before a sudden thaw would have washed it away. The proof was in the preserved harvest, the saved homes. Seeing the direct, life-saving benefit of connection, the keeper's resistance softened into a grudging, then a genuine cooperation. This was the new age, an era of whispers carried on roots of light. Architects from the eastern groves shared designs for bridges that mirrored the strength of interwoven branches, while Gondorian stonemasons taught their techniques for capturing sunlight in white rock, creating cities that glowed from within even after dusk. The trees became living libraries, and the keepers their librarians, facilitating an exchange of art, medicine, and philosophy that elevated every connected realm. To ensure this knowledge would never again be lost to fear or forgetfulness, Elara began her great work. By the light of each tree, she wrote. She filled scroll after scroll, not with dry histories, but with the living essence of each memory. Her compendium recorded the cedar's rain song in musical notation, the Heartwood's golden light in formulas of harmony, and the white tree's resilience in parables of courage. This was not a book of answers, but a guide to asking the right questions, a map for future generations to navigate their own relationship with the past. The stakes of this unity were proven not in grand battles, but in quiet miracles. A coastal village, guided by a dream sent from an inland tree, evacuated hours before a tsunami struck. An explorer, lost in a trackless desert, was guided to safety by the faint, persistent glow of a sapling on the horizon, its light a beacon of remembered paths. The network had become a nervous system for the world, sensing imbalance and offering guidance, its value measured in saved lives and discovered wonders. Years turned, and the woman who walked the roads became a story herself. Elara's name was whispered in classrooms and sung in lullabies, a legend of the one who taught the world to remember. And in every courtyard, in every hidden grove, the white trees glowed a little brighter, their light now holding the profound and grateful memory of her journey, a permanent part of the story they told to the stars. The gloom was a physical weight, a suffocating silence that promised only an end to stories. Here, at the heart of the wasteland, Alara faced the ancient stump, a twisted scar of forgotten grief. The shadows did not attack with monsters, but with her own heart, whispering every doubt, every failure, every moment she had fallen short. She felt the cold of the mountain pass, the sting of Valmir's accusations, the terror of watching the light fade. Why fight when the end is sorrow? The void seemed to breathe. Her spirit faltered, the collective hope of the network feeling like a distant dream against this immediate, crushing despair. In that moment, she understood the final choice. She could not battle this darkness with force, for it fed on conflict. She had to answer it with an act of pure, defiant creation. From her pack, she took her last treasure, the final sapling from Gondor, its silver leaves flickering weakly. Kneeling, she dug into the hard, cold earth with her bare hands, placing the fragile tree into the shallow grave. Then she began to pour herself into it. She did not command the sapling to grow. She offered it every memory she carried. She gave it the golden dawn of the eastern grove, the steadfast song of the mountain spring, the collective faith of her people in the courtyard. She channeled the joy of a child's first steps, the sorrow of a queen's sacrifice, the resilience of a river carving stone. She poured every lesson of compassion, every spark of courage, every shared story into that single, fragile point of light. The cost was immediate and devastating. Her own strength flowed out of her, a visible silver stream leaving her body. She felt herself fading, her vision dimming, her body growing cold as the last of her essence fed the roots. The sapling trembled, its light guttering against the immense, ancient sorrow. It was a battle between a vast, silent anguish and a single, concentrated offering of hope. As Elara collapsed, her last breath a whisper on the stagnant air, the sapling's roots finally found their grip. They pierced through the layers of pain and touched something pure beneath. A brilliant, blinding light erupted from the tiny tree, a silent detonation of pure memory that shot across the plain. This was not just a new white tree. It was a transformation. The light did not destroy the gloom, it healed it. The blackened stump shimmered and dissolved, its ancient grief finally acknowledged, honored, and released. The barren earth softened, and a new grove, vibrant and fertile, spread from that single point of defiance, transforming the world's oldest scar into its newest sanctuary. The white trees now stand as a living constellation across the world, their steady, brilliant light, a constant, silent conversation between continents. This is no longer a fragile network, but a resilient tapestry where the memory of a northern blizzard helps a southern city prepare its harvest, and the joy from an eastern festival strengthens the heart of a western keeper during a long winter. Alara, her hair now silver as the tree's bark, walks these connected groves not as a savior, but as a humble gardener of the soul. She knows each pulse of light is more than a relic of the past. It is a compass for the future, guiding choices with the hard-won wisdom of ages. In Gondor, the original white tree stands in the heart of the citadel, its roots now intertwined with a grove of its own offspring. The city thrives, its people no longer merely studying history, but living in a constant, vibrant dialogue with it. A stonemason might pause, feeling a sudden insight from an ancient artisan's memory flow through him, perfecting his craft. A mother might soothe her child with a lullaby, that has comforted children for 10,000 years. They are forever connected to their own past and to each other, their individual stories given meaning by the collective epic they all share. The tree is no longer a symbol they look upon, but a presence they live within, an eternal promise that even in the face of the deepest darkness, a single act of courage, rooted in memory, can renew the world. And so the light endures, a quiet, unwavering testament to the choice to remember, to hope, and to grow.
you.